You cling to all of these tools because it feels like a safety net. But if you create too many safety nets, you're not going to give your creative spark enough room to play.
It's really easy with social media. You get on it and do the doom scroll. You scroll, and you realize it's been over an hour and you haven't done anything
When I
else.
sit down to dictate, I haven't sharpened that tool yet of verbal storytelling. Verbally telling a story is another skill in and of itself, and you have to feel comfortable with that.
I was one of those people who's like, I will never be able to dictate. I tried methods, it did not click. Read your book, and there were a couple of exercises that I swear by them. I absolutely swear by them.
Don't change, right? Like, stay gold, pony boy. Like, you don't want to do anything else other than that same passionate mentality that you have now. Like, that's the goal.
Hey folks, welcome to the BookFunnel podcast. This is episode 14, and I am joined today, as always, by my co-hosts, Kelly Tansey and Emma Allison, and our guest today, Christopher Downing, a writing coach, been a writing coach for the past 10 years, and an expert on dictation. Chris, thank you for joining us today. I know I introduced you as Christopher. For Chris, we'll probably go back and forth throughout the podcast today. Good to have you here. For those of our watchers who don't know really who you are, give us the quick rundown. Who is Coach Chris?
Yeah, I writing for about 15 years now, successfully for about 10, and decided that was much better off at helping people. So I started a writing coaching business about 10 years ago, and it's been a blast since.
Awesome. And we'll get into that, of course. Here at the beginning, though, we do like to do some little updates about our current progress. Of course, all of us here are authors as well. And so I think we should start with Emma today. Emma, how's the writing been going lately? I know it's been a couple weeks because...
Well, this is interesting because Coach Chris is my coach. It's like having your dad there while you're telling secrets.
So you have to be honest is what you're saying, right?
Okay, there's some good and some bad. The good is I have gotten into a flow with batching some marketing content. The bad is, and I mentioned my project matrix in Tips to the Trenches way back. I think it has some unintended consequences. So I have not been writing for about 2 weeks.
Well, hey.
It could also be burnout. We're gonna figure that out. But I am back in content marketing. I'm doing something.
And that's important too. That's like part of the business.
Yeah, it is.
And I'm sure Chris can maybe do we could maybe even do see what a coaching session is like. Do a little mini coaching session with you, Emma, at some point today, right? That could be fun. Maybe we'll get to that. That's all right. Kelly, what about you? How have the words been flowing?
Not flowing.
Yeah.
No,
that's right.
It's a little bit weird because of break and having everybody here, and there's birthday parties. Both my daughters had birthdays last week.
Yeah.
And so it's just been a lot of stuff. Last night I went through and I was like, okay, what I should do is start reading my work in progress from the beginning. I'm about 37,000 words in, and maybe I just need to go back and kind of go back through it. And I'm making tiny changes, but I'm not editing. I'm just sort of flowing through and seeing what I'm going to do. And then I'm hoping by tomorrow night is when I'm going to sit down and really try to get some words out.
Yeah. No, there's different, it ebbs and flows. Mm-hmm. So I never want anybody to feel like I'm putting you on the spot. Sometimes the words are just no, I totally get it. As for me, though, I've actually written some words. I just kind of got rid of all my goodwill there, didn't I, with what I just said? Anyway, no, I'm diving back.
It comes and goes, right?
Right. Because I've been talking about kind of the new strategy I'm taking where I spent the first quarter of the year doing all my outlining for everything, because that's kind of how my brain works. And I'm now in the transition where I'm starting to write. And to do that, I'm kind of easing my way into it. So I've written a couple bonus chapters, one for my recent release and one for another book that needed it. And just kind of doing that because it's really easy. I don't have outlines for them, actually. I'm just jumping in and kind of doing more free writing and to just kind of get myself into the groove, because I feel like I know that I gain kind of creative momentum as I'm getting started. So I'll start slow, and then when I get into something, then that's where I build the momentum, and then the words can be faster and easier. And so this is just kind of that transition week, like you said, Kelly, from spring break, and my daughter also had a birthday, and yeah, it was kind of crazy. What about you, Chris? What are you, creatively wise? What are you up to these days?
Yeah, I have a mix of nonfiction and fiction.
Yeah,
Nonfiction is going really well. I just published my latest book about 3 weeks ago, and that was a blast. Now I'm swinging back over to the fiction side of things.
sure.
Yeah, it's going pretty well. It's a matter of just carving out the time and
Yeah,
setting boundaries with the family stuff, which is the hardest part, I think,
right.
for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I remember being in college and this the amount of time I wasted being a young bachelor with no responsibilities, no real responsibilities, you know what I mean? And I look back, I'm like, I had all of that time and I
Yeah,
just wasted it. Because
yeah,
you don't realize one's family and responsibility. Even if you don't have a family, you're with adult responsibilities. You probably have a job. Even if you're a full-time author, there's so many other responsibilities that like your time just gets taxed, here and there.
hmm
So absolutely, that's a big part of the struggle. All right, so we are on to our first segment for today. Tips from the trenches. In this segment, we share with you guys some self-publishing and writing related tips. Of course, Kelly, Emma, and myself, we are all authors. Our guest today, Chris, is also an author. We like to share tips that maybe sometimes are specific to just self-publishing, maybe something specific to BookFunnel even. We do have some advice for that because, of course, Kelly, Emma, and myself are also author support specialists. And then we also will sometimes share some writing related things. So we usually kind of go around and then have a little discussion on each tip.
Okay, so before I get started with my actual tip, this is just a little reminder. We've talked about taxes. Go do your
Uh-huh.
taxes, people. Go put your receipts into your program. Go do that because I don't do that, and I'm just reminding you, go do that. So that's one of my tips. So I was actually thinking about this. This is one of the things that new authors don't really think to do, especially if you're writing in a series, which is to create a series Bible. And this can be just a document that you keep that keeps track of your characters, like if they have like what eye color they have, or if they have tattoos or scars, any of those things, because you want that continuity so that when you write later in the series and you're like, what scar did he have? And you have to write it, and there's going to be some reader who's going to go, but wait, you said that his birthday was in May, but it's actually, now you're saying it's in July. So keeping that sort of continuity, there are programs, I haven't used any that I found. I was kind of adapting Trello to try and do this. It's a lot easier to do it when you're starting a series from scratch or starting at the beginning. It is really hard. I was trying to do it starting at like book 3, and now I'm like, okay, wait, and it keeps you from having to go back and reread your book for continuity. But you will
Yeah.
have readers that will be like, hey, that was really inconsistent. You said he was born here, but now he's born there. You will. So just, keep a series Bible on hand, and it's helpful. It's just a helpful thing to keep it. And it's way easier to get started on it when you're starting a series or only a book into the series than trying to do it. And I believe there's people on Fiverr that'll help you if you've already done it.
Right.
There are people you can pay that will, like, I haven't done that, but I've heard some
Yeah.
authors recommend it.
Yeah, no, I second that tip. And I myself, I've actually did this deliberately when I was outlining this past quarter, was I am going to have basically a character sheet for each character, at least the main ones. There's going to be new characters that will pop up here and there, but for all of those main characters, I'm going to have a character sheet that has all of that information there before I've even started the first draft. And I also go like the extra, I don't know if anybody else does this, and this could be a touchy, controversial subject, but I also use AI to like create an image of the character. Sometimes it takes a while. So then I have like a visual that I can go back to. I just use it for myself to be like, oh yeah, I could just look at it at a glance and be like, that's what that character looked like.
Yeah.
And that's the way you can do it. I know some people, AI, touchy subject there, but it's an option for some people. But that's a good tip. That's a good tip because your readers will be like, oh yeah, no, you said his eyes were blue and now they're green. For whatever
One
reason,
star.
it's like yes, I know. That's there you go. That's how you avoid the one-star
And
reviews,
I am
kids.
that reader because my author published book 17 20 years after book 1, and she had like one throwaway line, and I'm like, nah, boo, that it wasn't like that in book 1.
Right.
Your editor did not catch that. I was kind
Yeah.
of on
No, and it's hard too. it's hard. You don't realize it. Like you, especially if you're writing a series
Yeah.
and when you're in the middle of writing as the author, as the writer, you're so engrossed in the creation of it in that moment that being able to recall that information, like it's a different experience for you than it is for the reader. I
And
feel
then you
like.
don't know what makes it on the page, because I was wondering if that sentence in book 17 was what was edited out or revised, but she still had it in her head. And 20 years
Yeah.
later, just forgot that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Emma, what do you have for us today, tip wise?
Well, so we're always telling the newer authors, intermediate authors, to work on your taglines for your landing pages, work on your blurbs, work on your subject lines to get open and click rates up. And then authors will be like, but I don't know copywriting. I don't know what to do, where to start. So one tip is to keep a swipe file. And what I mean is every time you buy something, and granted, this is easier if you write in a niche that you also read in, but the principle is crossover. So every time you buy something, especially if it's like a one click, take a quick screenshot, store it away, and then you can go back later and break apart what is it about that got you to buy. And then you're slowly training yourself over time to recognize what you respond to emotionally. So that way, if you don't have time to go and study copywriting and take the courses and all of that, at least you can start to develop an instinctive, intuitive understanding of what readers will respond to, because you know what you respond to. So that's always kind of my quick and dirty when and I've started doing it a lot lately in the last year. When I one click a book, I'll stop for a few seconds, be like, why did I one click that? And I'll be like, oh, because they had these certain words, and those are trigger words for me.
Right.
So hey.
Yeah.
Do you keep it in a specific file? Like, do you have like a file that you put the image to?
Let's pretend I do that instead of just taking a quick screenshot and it's still floating around in my iPhone.
Your photos?
But it's there. You can go back and find it if you needed to. It's kind of like it's like memory that you can kind of offload it, and then you can go back and find.
I have the Notion app on my phone, so I could just take the extra step to upload it to a page. I'm gonna have to start doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've done that before with like author ads I've seen on Facebook. Too. I'll see an author's ad. I'll be like, oh, that's a sexy ad. I really like that. Like, I should try that kind of style. Not like copy it verbatim, you know what I mean? But like, I never thought of doing this that way. I've taken screenshots of that before, and they're somewhere on my phone. So the good thing though is that if you have an iPhone, at least I can't speak to the Android experience, at least newer versions of the iPhone, you can actually go into your photos and you can search by text. So if you can remember some aspect, or if you searched the word ad, it would probably pull up any screenshots of ads that you had taken, and then you can sort through them. So, which is kind of a handy little addition to your tip.
One caveat, their etiquette, because like if you're snapping pictures of people's ads or things like that, or their Instagram squares, a lot of this stuff is templates or designs so they cross over, but try not to copy A, B, C. That's a little rude. So take it as inspiration, not as like, I'm going to do exactly what they're doing. Put your own spin on it, please.
Sure.
We know that stuff
absolutely.
like
that. Right. So I'll go ahead and do mine here, and then Chris, you can wrap up with your tip here in just a moment. So my tip is actually going to tie into a recent webinar that we've done. In fact, to be honest with you, we're recording this podcast before the webinar. The webinar is actually going to occur later, but this podcast is going to get released. Okay, time dilation and science fiction. I'm a time traveler. That's what it is. Never mind. We're in that webinar. I'm talking about companion games for fiction. Like making a game to go along with your fiction. And one tip that I want to share with you guys, and this could be for you as an author, maybe even for if you're primarily a game designer, is that BookFunnel can be used to deliver printable, like print and play games. So I am currently developing a game for my fiction series that's a variation on chess. If you couldn't figure it out, right? Like I use chess imagery in my book covers. That's some of my cover art. And so the original version of it is going to be print and play. I'm going to be using it as a reader magnet, and I'm just going to deliver it as a PDF through BookFunnel. And so they can download the PDF, they can print all the components themselves and cut it out so they can just play the game, which is also great if you want people to like test your game as well. Really easy to distribute it in that way through BookFunnel. But another thing that you can do, and this is what I'm planning to do, especially for something you're giving away, but even if you were selling it, you could do this too, is to include instructions in that print and play game, like a one page at the beginning that gives instructions to a copy and print center on how to print those components for the reader, for the customer, right? So that they could take the PDF and literally just take that instruction page or the file rather, go to Staples and be like, the instructions are included, just follow the instructions and I'll pay you whatever I have to pay you. And then Staples does all the work for them, produces the components, cuts them out in some cases. They'll do that for you. You sometimes have to pay for it. But if it's a simple game, it's not so bad. And you can do it that way too. So that's just one tip. I'm going to talk more about it in the webinar. So if you haven't already, go ahead and check that out.
That's a really specific tip.
It is.
A very specific thing.
I told you we would get specific too. And that's, again, maybe doesn't apply to everybody, but maybe you've thought about it, but you're like, just how would I deliver it? How would I get it to people? Like, if I'm doing anything that's physical, they've got to buy it. Have them print it. You can give it to them as a PDF through BookFunnel and keep it simple. So it'll make more sense if you watch the webinar. If you're like, whoa, this is coming out of left field, Jack. What are we talking about? Watch the webinar and it'll make more sense. Anyway, Chris, I'll cede the floor.
I'll do a little bit more of a process tip.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when they have a problem, when they sit down to write and maybe critical voice shows up and they can't write, their creative spark is not doing what it's supposed to do. A lot of it has to do with different forms of stress and anxiety that are in our lives. And so if we're feeling a little stressed or if we're feeling a little anxiety in our life, that's going to have a significant negative impact on our creative process. So my big tip is stay the F away from news or anything like that. Social media, news, just about anything online for about an hour and a half to 2 hours before you sit down and write. Because if you're exposing yourself to news, whatever side you're on, and it gets you a little fired up, well, that's going to trigger everything from stress and anxiety. It might pump a little cortisol into your bloodstream. And if you have those things going on, your critical voice is going to be on fire and your creative voice is going to be scared to death and hiding in the corner with a blanket over her head. So that's my big tip. If you have an hour to write and it's coming up, do everything you can to lower your stress and anxiety an hour and a half to 2 hours before your writing process begins, your writing practice begins. But specifically, stay away from the news and social media because those things are they were engineered to make you feel stressy and full of anxiety. So have boundaries around those things long before you sit down to write.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Even I would add on like other sources of stress, like ex-wives and
I got rid of my third husband.
But other things in your personal life. What was that, Emma? I missed that.
That's why I got rid of my third husband, because he was stressing me out. And I literally could not write. Write. And I connected the dots.
Okay.
Well, he's messing with my money. No, you got to go.
Well, but still, whatever the source may be, I'm being tongue in cheek, of course, when I say that. But there's all kinds of sources of stress in your life, and you've got to be able to put walls around. Maybe this might be why, and I don't know, Chris, maybe you can confirm this or not. But for a lot of people, like late at night is when they find it's easiest to be more creative because it's like the day is done. They have nothing else on their plate. They don't have other things to do on their to-do list for the day. And they can just push all that aside and be creative like after 10 p.m. at night or something like that. I know a lot of writers will write in those hours. So I don't know if that's something that kind of falls in line with that, or in your experience is something that a lot of authors find helpful, or maybe I'm just pulling at threads.
No, I think it's still a mix because I think still ultimately boils down to whether you're a night owl or you're a morning person.
Sure.
A morning person. If you're a morning person, then don't open your phone first thing in the morning if you're going to be a morning writer, right? So get your writing done before you start opening emails, opening social media, turning on the news, right? And then likewise in the evening, I would still say, like if you're in the evening wind down mode, don't use social media to wind down, right? Or scrolling,
right?
Because that's still going to give you little tiny pings of anxiety, even if it's all good news, which it's not. But even if it was,
Sure.
it's still engineered to make you feel a little bit of anxiety, whichever one you are. If you're a morning person or a night owl, still just make sure that,
Yeah.
the half hour to an hour or more before you sit down to write, you stay away from that kind of stuff. But yeah, like when you put the kids to bed, I know that as soon as you put the kids down, it's like, it's just all
Right.
of the stress just sort of like,
Right.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of
Right.
truth to what you say.
Well, I
Right.
think it's really easy also with social media. You get on it and that anxiety, that cortisol is like firing, and you're like, they do the doom scroll, you're scroll, and you realize it's been over an hour and you haven't done anything else. And this is it. This is what you've done. You've just looked at this thing having like, and it feeds us, right? Like it's feeding, especially for people that have like a high need to learn or know things that are happening, it feeds it. And so you're feeding your everything about it. And then you look around and go, I literally haven't done anything all day, or I haven't done anything in this time frame that I was supposed to be doing what I was supposed to be doing. So it's easy to get that time suck. I actually took my apps, all the apps that I put them in iPhones, you can put them into like folders. I don't know about Androids, but you put them into folders, and my folder says time sucks. And like I put everything in there so I can't easily get it. I took it off of my ability because it predicts which apps you want to open when you do like a swipe up or whatever. It predicts what apps you want to open, and so it'll automatically put your top social media posts, if whatever they are, those apps are there. So you can actually make it not recommend any of those apps, like force them to not. And so now it's putting up things that are related to like Notion and other stuff, Slack for work. It's not giving me social media, so that I have to be intentional about going to those apps. And it makes me think a little bit more before I go there. Like, do I really want to open that right now? Do I really want that can of worms? So, and some people I know on deadline, they'll completely delete those apps from their phones completely, so they don't have that easy access to it.
Oh, that's good.
And put it back on when you're ready to market, right?
Right. Along those lines, too, so maybe to look at it from another angle, and Chris, maybe you have some examples of this, what would be some good, like, replacement behaviors then that would help you be calm and relax? So instead of looking at the news or social media, do this instead.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you just said right there. It defines the difference between good habits and bad habits, right? So a bad habit would be scrolling social media beforehand. A good habit would be something that lowers your anxiety, lowers your stress and anxiety. That's it. That's what they do. So, I mean, to each their own, like you throw on the Stevie Wonder playlist and you dance in your living room. I mean, there's nothing better than that. That's going to make you feel good, right?
Right.
I mean, to each their own. I mean, if you want to do some sort of a physical activity to shake off the day, I think, that's great too. So some people have really entrenched startup routines, which is great, right? If you are always in the same place at the same time every time you want to write, that's good. Sometimes we have to write on the fly, and so you don't want to rely on startup routines too much. But just anything that makes you feel good, that is a positive, healthy thing to do. So like dancing in your living room, that's a win. Maybe playing with your kids. Sometimes that stresses us out actually a little bit more. But sometimes it's a lot of fun. So it really depends. Go for a walk and think about the story at hand.
What if it's eating cupcakes, Coach? I mean, what if
had to be healthy?
Cupcakes really make
He said healthy.
What
He said
flavor
healthy.
of cupcake? What flavor is it? What have you got?
Anything with fruit filling.
That sounds delicious.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. That's not, honestly, cupcakes is not the worst thing in the world, but like it's not going to cause you like stress and anxiety or make you have this urge to check your feed 20 minutes after you put it down, right? Are you good with one cupcake, or do you need to keep eating cupcakes? Is it cupcake or is it cupcakes?
Some people's like daily coffee is probably the equivalent of a cupcake, in terms of sugar and calories. So, and coffee is like, it helps you get focused, and it boosts your mood as well, the caffeine a little bit. So hey, cupcake maybe. To each their own, though. I like that. I like that because I think everybody is different, and there's gonna be different things that might help you like get in that zone and feel calm and relaxed. That's a good tip. All right, we're going to move on to our main topic today, which is dictation. We're going to talk about some other stuff too, but Coach Chris, you are an expert on the topic, and we've been talking about dictation since Emma joined the team. Emma and Kelly actually joined the team at the same time. I should clarify that. But like the first time we sat down and talked, it was one of the first things that Emma mentioned was dictation and how helpful it was for her. And I was a long time dictation skeptic. Technology has changed and so forth, and that's maybe kind of brought me around. And now I am personally kind of committed to figuring it out. Maybe it's not going to be everything that the only way that I write books, but I know I'm going to be a major component of it because I've seen the light, right? But I want to, let's maybe start from square one on dictation, right? Give me the sales pitch as an author. Why would I want to consider dictation? Let's start from there, and then we can kind of take the conversation where it flows.
It can make life easier, but it may not make life easier, but it can make life easier. The big caveat, let's get that out of the way first, is that there is no silver bullet, right? If you've been writing now for more than a year, you've tried different things, and because everything is sort of sold as the silver bullet, if you do this, writing is going to be a lot easier. If you use this app, your writing is going to be a lot easier. It never is, though, is it? No, it never is. So I feel like dictation was originally pitched as the thing that's going to give you 10,000 words a day. It's going to make your life easier. You're going to feel more creative. You're going to make $1 million because you're going to be able to publish, a book a month, a book every 2 weeks, whatever we're at right now. But it doesn't work that way. There is no silver bullet. Dictation is just one more input device that you can use to write. So if you feel like dictating today, dictate. If you feel like typing today, type. If you feel like doing pen and paper, by all means, write with pen and paper, which is starting to make a great comeback. And I'm so happy about the old pen and paper, showing up again because it's good. So,
yeah.
It's just a tool. It's just all it is. Dictation is just a tool. It's not gonna save your writing career. It's not gonna make you $1 million. It's just another tool in your tool belt to get the writing done. So that's the caveat. It's not gonna save you. It's not gonna save your writing career. You still have to do the things. You still have to write. It's just a form of an input tool. So I like to say that first. That said, it'll save your life and it'll save your writing career, and it's amazing, and it'll make you $1 million. So, but like with everything, you start slow. It's just like if you were to learn any new tool, it takes a while. You have to practice. You can't expect everything to come right away. And there's going to be ups and downs. And that we can get into that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, for somebody who's starting to use dictation, I'd probably put myself in that category because even though I've done it here and there, I haven't been consistently doing it. I want to consistently do it because there are some benefits from it, like you said, potentially being able to write a little bit faster, but then also just kind of the natural, the more natural tone of voice that would come through potentially. Anyway, yeah, for somebody just getting started out, like you mentioned, practicing, like something you have to practice. What does that look like? Those first few steps that you take into dictation, or what do you recommend people start with if they're curious about giving it a try?
Well, the first advice I give to everybody is slow down. Slow down. So let me give you a small example. The rate I am speaking right now is right about 5,000 words per hour. If you were to talk like this, people would go crazy because it feels so slow. And even right now, it seems a little weird to talk like this. But right now, I'm speaking at about 5,000 words per hour. If you can maintain that, you're good to go, right? Like that's easy. I can talk that fast. Or can you slow yourself down to talk at that rate? So don't worry about talking quickly. I think that's the first mistake people make is they get the microphone in their hand or they start dictating. And the idea is to get these high word counts. And so they start speaking quickly and they're not used to it. And it sort of makes a bit of a mess of things. So slow down. Slow down is the first thing. Learn, go in small chunks and slow down. You don't have to write fast or large chunks at one time. Just ease your way into it.
Right.
That's what I would tell someone starting.
Right. What's interesting, because you mentioned that pace is about 5,000 words per hour. I think I'd have to do the math, but I looked it up and it's actually pretty close to the average speed of words per minute for audiobooks, if I'm not mistaken. It's fairly close to that. And just a kind of a random thing that I noticed when I was doing some of my research ahead of time, because like, do you want to go slow because you need a little bit of time to maybe process what you're saying? You're kind of creating the words as you're going.
Nice.
So I imagine you're leaving some room for that while you're going at that slightly slower pace. So you're not, like overdriving your headlights, so to speak, right? Where you're,
Mhm.
you're looking or you're talking farther ahead than your mind is paying attention
Right.
to in that moment, right? Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I liken it to writing with pen and paper. When you're writing with pen and paper, you're usually in your head composing two sentences ahead, right? Like you're writing what you
Yeah.
already know you're going to write, but your brain is already two sentences ahead, figuring out what you're going to write. And that's a wonderful way to compose sentences because you're going at a nice pace that allows your brain to stay ahead, just kind of like you said, right?
Uh-huh.
So speaking slowly allows you to think a little bit ahead of where you're at, and that's helpful.
Right. Right.
And I think we do that when we type as well, right? You're 100% not focused on the sentence at hand. You're sort of part of your brain is starting to think about how you're going to wrap that sentence up or what sentence structure you might be using. Maybe not specifically like that, but something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I was thinking that too with where you have like when I've dictated, I feel like I have to take really long pauses where I wouldn't have to take that type of a pause if I was typing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll take like a really long pause, and sometimes I'll even just turn off my, pause the device that I'm using and just be like, okay, just put together the paragraph, the whole paragraph. Like, where am I going with this? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't always have to do that when I'm writing, but I think that's okay. I think that's the barriers that, like, we think in our brains are, we're talking faster than we type, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. With practice, you can get to a place where, I mean, it takes time. I'm talking like a year of dictating around there consistently, like several days a week, where you can get into a bit of a flow state where you are just dictating the story at a slow pace and you're thinking a little bit ahead and your brain is able to sort of multitask while you're writing like you would when you're comfortably typing. But like with all flow states, it really requires a sense of comfort and a sense of ease. If you're a little anxious about the sound of your voice, if you're anxious about whether what you're doing just sucks or not, I mean, that happens when that used to happen when we were typing and we like start over editing while we're drafting, that type of thing, because you can't go back and edit while you're dictating sometimes, right? That causes a sense of unease.
Right.
But with enough practice and you develop that confidence, you can sort of enter that flow state where the sentences are flowing. You're not having trouble pulling vocabulary out of your brain, which is something sometimes that happens. You can't think of the right word because you're overthinking it or whatever. You just get frazzled in the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, so then here comes the practice again. Just as much practice as possible, and the learning curve, it's there, right? So it's if you dictate every day, a little bit every day, there'll be like a 1 month period of growth, and after 3 months, you'll be like, oh, and now I can do this. This feels a lot easier. 6 months and a year, and then usually about after a year, things are really clicking. But you've put the time in. You really have.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned about that element of it, like the getting comfortable, because what I've noticed as I've started to, explore dictation, is that for nonfiction, I can do it effortlessly.
Right. Right.
I could dictate a nonfiction book, like cover to cover, and not even like think about it. Obviously, I'd have to go back and make lots of edits after the fact, but like that would just seem totally natural to me. And I think part of it is because I feel comfortable talking in that voice, because even before I did BookFunnel webinars, I used to be a martial arts instructor. I got up in front of people and I had to explain something, right? So I'm comfortable talking in that voice. I have never got in front of people and told them a story in that same way. I'd like, you tell a story to friends and things like that, right? But I've never like gotten up and told somebody a story or did that type of storytelling. So of course it would make sense that when I sit down to dictate, I haven't sharpened that tool yet of storytelling, verbal storytelling. So I think I'm connecting maybe a little dot there that's like, that's a skill in and of itself. Just like storytelling with your fingers on the type, when you're typing, verbally telling a story is another skill in and of itself. And you have to feel comfortable with that, I imagine, for dictation to really start clicking, for it to feel natural, maybe. And you could maybe learn that through just dictation. Maybe you could also just learn it from also doing some verbal storytelling, maybe. I don't know what your thoughts are on
Yeah,
that.
you've hit on something that's really important. Connecting the dots, definitely. I mean, you're connecting neural pathways in your brain, right? So when you're talking like this, like just with friends or just verbally having a conversation with somebody, we make lots of grammatical mistakes. We use sentence fragments. We have a very narrow vocabulary that we use. We are not profound most of the time. So that is literally stored in part of our brain, in our informal conversation style, sentence structure, vocabulary, all of that is in part of our brain. And then you have, this is absolutely not correct, by the way, where things are at. But then you have on this side of your brain, the storytelling, the sentence structure. That's the big one. Sentence structures that we would use in our storytelling, vocabulary, how we put things together, paragraph, alternating sentence length, things like that. That's over here, and that is connected to our fingers, right? So when we're typing, it just naturally is we're pulling from this storytelling part of our brain, that vocabulary, that sentence structure, and it's just all connected. And then if we were to go ahead and even if you try to tell a story to your friends, more than likely you'll still use sentence fragments and crap vocabulary and things like that. You won't use that unless over time you practice and you literally start building neural connections in your brain to the storytelling elements of this whole set of vocabulary and sentence structure to your mouth, literally to your lips and your tongue and all of your articulators and stuff like that, so that when you talk, you're accessing that part of your brain. So that's a big deal. So can you dictate amazingly right out of the gate? Probably not, because you have to build those neural pathways over time, which is what practice is, right? That's why we practice, whether it's martial arts or, whatever we're doing, you have to practice.
Right.
Speaking of practice.
Yes, got something.
Because before your book, I was one of those people who's like, I will never be able to dictate. I tried methods, it did not click. Read your book, and there were a couple of exercises that, for whatever reason, the first one was the talking slow, because no one had ever said that to me before, to slow down. That makes sense. But you also have a couple of other exercises that I think would be really good to go over, because anecdotally, when I talk to my author friends about dictation, it's always like that first 4 to 6 weeks where they drop off, because that's like the red zone, the most awkward part. Because they don't understand it's supposed to feel like hell. It will feel like hell till your brain makes the switch. But the Little Red Riding Hood one, the 5-minute word vomit one, those are my favorites. So go for those. Yeah, I mean, I swear by them. I absolutely swear by them. The Little Red Riding Hood, yes. And I'm going to remind you what your exercises are. That's the one where... That's the one where you take a fairy tale or story you already know and you dictate it. And then
that one wasn't in the book. That was one that I assigned to you one-on-one, by the way. I don't think that was actually in the Foolproof Dictation book.
I'm going to pull it up right now.
But she liked it.
Chris, do you have a story Bible for your nonfiction that you could pull up really quick and be like, no, I didn't.
What is in there? I have no idea.
Tying that back to the Tips from the Trenches segment. But Emma did share that one with me. So this idea of taking like a story, maybe a story that is, like Little Red Riding Hood, something that everybody knows. You heard it as a kid. And then so you can recall it easily from memory, I suppose. Like that's maybe a good exercise to start with. How would you, as Little Red Riding Hood, just one example, what's that doing when you actually dictate that kind of story that you're familiar with?
It takes the pressure off. It allows you to create in a non-consequence environment that's going to keep you from judging yourself, having expectations, critical voice stays in its bed where it needs to be. So it allows you to practice your narration chops, your narrative chops, storytelling, right? Connecting those neural pathways without the fear of they're all going to laugh at me, right? Which is what usually screws most of us up. So You don't have to like worry about creating a story. So if it happens to be a story you know already, great. So you just tell the story. But even then, it's still, it still takes practice. I did the same
Right.
thing. I did the same Little Red Riding Hood, Cinderella versions. I did the Three Little Bears, actually, is what I did. I did Three Little Bears.
Oh, okay.
And, when I was first doing that myself, like I would still get 5 minutes in and Cinderella or Goldilocks wasn't even in the cabin yet. Like I'm still like doing setting descriptions and like weird stuff like that. It's just awful. It's just, a bunch of just crap writing. So it should be like, oh, stop, like just tell the story. Quit trying to impress the people who are never going to listen to this. Just tell the story. And so you can start to relax and just tell the story. And it's great practice. And again,
Yeah.
you're building those neural pathways in your brain.
That's a
Right.
good point, because I remember the novella I was dictating with my first while I was going through your book. Effing terrible, man. Like so much expository. It's still sitting on my hard drive. I will go back to, but your writing will suck at the beginning. But I did find it. It is tryout number 3. I told you I'd be remembering.
Oh, go on. All right, go.
It's one of your prompts, the scene summary prompt. And I know why you did it, because what you wanted people to do was practice not having to think about the story while you're dictating, which is also why you were talking. I'm sitting here telling everybody about his own book.
That book sounds really good. I should read that again. It made me remember how the hell it's supposed to go.
The whole point.
Go on. It's fascinating.
The whole point was to get your brain out of thinking about the story and plotting as you go mode, which leads into the other exercise that was really helpful. Was before you start dictating, just take a few minutes. And I think that's why it really worked for me, because I storyboard a lot. I already have I do movies in my head and my people talk to each other. So yeah, I'm insane. But before you start, you were like saying, just know the next 5 minutes, have an idea of what's going on before you start dictating. But yeah, I proved it. It was in there, Little Red Riding Hood.
You're right again. Yeah.
It was that pivotal, because that was really the moment it clicked. And after it clicked, the first couple of weeks was agony. I didn't get any words, but after it clicked, man, I was like 5K a day, all the way up to 10K a day, because it just, and when I tell you, it changed I know y'all have caveat. And the caveat is true. My coach knows the caveat is true with me.
So we talked about the Red Riding Hood exercise. We talked about, I think the 5-minute word vomit one was one that you were also bringing up.
Yeah, we hadn't talked about it
2,
yet.
5, 10, 20 was the other one. That's the name of it. But I think the core of it is I really want to hone in on that first 4 to 6 weeks and how fucking terrible it feels, and it's supposed to feel like that. And these are the exercises and the things that will help you transition your brain over. Because, I mean, I have told a lot of authors about this system over the years, a lot. And they're like, I don't have time. It's been too long. My brain, I'm like, just stick with it, damn you. So, yeah.
I think people quit. People quit because it's just like martial arts instruction, right? Like people quit after their first month, that sort of free month thing that you do or whatever. Like it's great, they love it, they know the benefits of it. It's it's fun, they like all the people, but they still quit. Some people just quit. Which is one of the benefits, of course, of having a coach, I think, which is, someone to hold you accountable and nudge you along, hold your hand, be compassionate, get you through those first 2 months of struggles so that things can start to click. So, again, I think it's the benefit of my job is to help people get past that first 4 to 6 weeks that are so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I will give your BookFunnel listeners or subscribers a great tip that I've told no one else except for a handful of people. If you want, it's similar to what you're talking about, Emma. Yeah, here we go. It's exclusive content. Is is the idea of practicing narration without expectation, and it's what I've called a narrative journal, right? So a lot of us have heard of morning pages. right? So you write first thing in the morning, and it's a great way to do that because it's good to practice writing, but it's also a great time to do that because your brain is not cluttered with the day, right? It's just a good practice. It makes you a better writer for all the reasons. Well, this is similar to this. It's a form of fiction journaling via dictation that you get to practice writing no pressure fiction. It's nothing you're ever going to publish. You're just goofing around, writing fiction via dictation. So you can practice all of the stuff, practice your vocabulary, sentence structure, just telling a story without pressure. It's the pressure that gets you, but it's the pressure is the thing that makes us all clam up with the microphone in our hand. And that's a lot of people experience dictation like that. And then like minutes tick by and they haven't said anything. It's because you're worried about saying something stupid, right? You don't want, people are not going to laugh at you. So creating a fiction journal where you write fiction, whatever, right? Just some random story, a little vignette, 100 words, 500 words, you ramble on for 5,000 words, but you write fiction that no one is ever going to see. And you do that 5 days a week for 5 to 10 minutes. And you just fill page after page after page with dictated fiction that no one is ever going to see. You don't have to keep writing the same story every day. You can just make stuff up on the fly. You can use prompts, not use prompts. You can continue the same story day after day. You can switch in the middle of a story. Like doesn't matter. No one's ever going to see this. So if you can remove that expectation, it's going to be a little bit easier to get into that flow state because your brain's not going to get scrambled with expectations. And then you're connecting those neural pathways, right? You're telling fiction. You're using your fiction storytelling, sentence structure, paragraph style, vocabulary. You're actually thinking a little bit about plot while you're writing, that type of stuff. And then if you do that, let's say 3 to 5 days a week, 5 to 10 minutes a day, you're going to get better. And so this is something that people can do on the side. So if you're a keyboard typer and you're in the middle of your work in progress, you don't want to immediately start doing dictation in your work in progress. That's not going to go well. So while you're typing your work in progress, spend 5 to 10 minutes a day writing in your fiction journal. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a no pressure, easy peasy. It's still going to be awkward to begin with because you haven't established those neural connections yet, but no one's going to read it. It's just going to be easy. And it gives you kind of a space that's less resistance around doing that because there's no expectations and no one's going to laugh at you. So that's my biggest tip of all tips. If you want to get better at dictation, actually, I would say this if you want to get better at fiction writing in general, whether you're typing or doing dictation, have a fiction journal that you write in 3 to 5 days a week, and it's just practice fiction that no one's ever going to see. Write a scene all in dialogue one day, right? Like that's a great way to practice your dialogue. Write your setting descriptions, goof around with metaphors and similes, some more literary kind of stuff. It's just a sandbox for you to be goofy, and it's going to allow you to make mistakes, and it doesn't matter. You just keep going.
Yeah.
That's
Would you recommend doing
that's
that?
the thing that will. It's the same thing similar to the Little Red Riding Hood, right? Like you're not worried about the story. You're not worried about getting things right. You're just practicing telling fiction. So
And do you recommend doing that at the start of like a writing session? Like you would do that before you sat down to actually do like an actual scene that you would want? Or is it more just about getting your brain doing that and you could still keep typing, but like that 5-10 minutes of journaling out loud kind of gets you going? Like how would you use that throughout a day, I guess?
I think you nailed it. It gets you going. It's a great way to warm up your storytelling chops, right? It's just like, yeah, it's a great way to warm up. So sure, do it beforehand, but also, you can write in your journal at any time in the day, right? Just like if it was a diary, right? Like maybe you like to do it at the end of the night because that's a great time to sort of, put your thoughts down on paper. But maybe you can like have a recorder going. Like if you dictate into a recorder or voice memos or whatever you're into, you can pick it up at any time. You've got 5 minutes, in your day. I'm just going to dictate a paragraph and just try some stuff. It doesn't even have to be a complete thought, but it is a great warm up to answer your point. or answer your question directly. It's a great warm up.
And I've got a tip for that, because even if you're an experienced dictator, you still have to let your brain each session make the switch. So a lot of times I will start a session and the dictation is me just plotting out, talking about what's going to happen, just like you plot anything else. But at a certain point, my brain, I guess, has enough of the plotting input that it will automatically just slip into the story, the prose. So I'll go from, and she's talking about this and doing this, and then she's going to feel like this, and then all of a sudden I'm talking in the POV of the character, and it goes from there. And it's a really smooth transition. Not always. Not always.
Yeah. The old book that we all turned to way back when was what? It was 2K to 10K. Does everyone remember Rachel Aaron's 2K to 10K? Like, that was the book that made it. People started going like, "Oh, I can write 10,000 words a day. Like, it's possible." That was kind of the book that started the rapid release phenomenon. Like, it was ahead of its time. But that was Rachel Aaron. She had like this triangle. Like, one of the things is know what you're going to write before you write. It doesn't mean do an intense outline of your scene, or if you're not an outliner, don't do an outline. But I think she suggested you write a little 200 summary of your scene before you start, which is just gets, so it does the two things, like you just said. It warms up your brain, it helps you transition to storytelling, and it just allows you to wrap your head around it. So that's, I mean, that really speaks to some of the old, whether you're typing or dictating, some of the older ideas around how do you write faster is just have a good sense of what it is that you're going to write. And whether it's like Chris Box talked about the movie in your head in his 5K to 5,000 words per hour, like have a little movie in your head, like the next 5 minutes of the story. Rachel Aaron talked about having 200 words summary before you start to write. And if you do that with dictation,
Yeah.
Interesting. So I had a question about a lot of us, are wondering about like what sort of devices, software, what do we need in order to do this effectively so that what we say in our dictation actually comes out to something that's a usable piece for putting it into, some other, like I use Scrivener. Like, how do I get what I've dictated to Scrivener without, too much chaos?
Yeah. I mean, every 6 months, the technology changes. The accuracy thing is gone. That's no longer a problem unless you have some really intense accent. That's still going to be a problem. But if you don't have a really intense accent, so if you have an Apple phone, I use voice memos now. Voice memo, one of the things that I love about voice memo is it allows you to, so you can record, like 3 minutes of dictation, and then your kids come kick in the door and, they need noodles. So you can stop it, and then noodles
Your
with
kids
butter,
too?
butter and salt, man. What is it with noodles, butter and salt, man?
Yeah.
You want red sauce on that? No. All right. So,
Lemon pepper.
right. So they need noodles. But then, so you hit stop. But then it allows you to go to that audio file, voice memo, and then like keep going. Right. So you can resume. I think it's the resume feature. So it's really easy to pause in and out of what you're doing. And then of course, I think you can even edit, or like if you screw up a paragraph, if you really want to pause it and go back, you can overwrite the last 30 seconds or something like that. The microphones on modern phones, I'm just using Apple because I don't know, Samsung or the Android experience either. I mean, from iPhone 6 on, the onboard microphone that is on your phone is just fine. You do not need an expensive microphone. You don't need to spend a dime. You don't have to spend any money to dictate. Like, all of the best features right now are completely free. They're on your phone, voice memo, the microphone. I will set my phone on my table and pace my office here, and I get up to 8 feet away from it, and it doesn't matter. It picks it up just fine.
Yeah.
So you don't need a microphone. The files are nice and neat. In fact, voice memo now on Apple phones, you can have them transcribe, and it's pretty accurate, honestly. And it's now inserting punctuation. Fine. If you still like a handheld recorder, that's cool. The app or the website that I recommend to everyone is TurboScribe. It's free. Nice. Unless you're doing like 10,000 hours a month or something like that, which you probably won't be doing. Good on you though. You are. But it's free. It's free. You upload your file and it transcribes it. Unlike Otter, which does the timestamping and some weird stuff like that. I don't
I
know
was
where
using
Otter's at
Otter and
now.
I was having some trouble. I used Otter on my last one. I moved it over into Otter and it was like, oh, I don't know. It's got all kinds
Yeah,
of weird
different
stuff
application.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not meant for fiction writing. But
Yeah.
TurboScribe is. It's fantastic and it's free. And so you just upload your files and it transcribes it in 3 seconds. And
Yeah.
it's beyond 99% accurate. You just
Right.
gotta check your paragraphs and your yeah, Jack.
I've used it actually. It's funny because in a previous episode of the podcast, I think it was the last one even.
Yeah, it was.
That was my tip, was TurboScribe. So
Nice.
I'm hearing you say that is like, okay, good. I'm glad that because I did some searching around trying to find the best one, and the fact that it was like, yeah, it's free. You could I think there's like a limit on, you can do like 3 files a day, but if you do like a long file, that's more than enough. I think 50 minutes is the maximum for each individual file, which that's almost 3 hours of dictation. So yeah, anybody I'm sure that's plenty for
You should go outside if you're doing that much.
Yeah, right. So I'm glad that you mentioned TurboScribe, because I was going to actually ask you, like, what do you recommend? And you knew the psychic connection was working, and you just knew what I was thinking.
Nice. Yeah.
So, because I played around, I got a voice recorder off of Amazon. It was like $50. I got it because it had its own built-in transcription, but it's terrible. Like, the built-in transcription is just awful. So I'm like, whatever, okay. But it's still convenient, and I like the idea of like you said, being able to set it down and like pace the room. Or I have to drive a fair bit to like my kids' appointments and things like that. And oftentimes in the cars when I talk to myself. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, and it's usually about something I'm writing or some idea, or like the BookFunnel webinars. If you've ever attended a BookFunnel webinar, I have given that webinar 5 times to myself in the car, and so I've started recording it so I can make the notes, and then I use those notes to make the slides, and I could do other stuff with it too, but to use that for dictation, and I just set it down and it's recording me. I'm not having to like hold my phone while I'm driving or anything weird like that, or not that I would do that anyway, but right, and so forth. So do you recommend, I guess, and maybe for each person, I know the answer might be, well, it depends on the person, but just recording an audio file as opposed to direct speech to text dictation? Because I see there's probably some advantages and disadvantages of each. What's your thoughts on that? Like dictating, like I have the Scrivener app on my phone. I could do speech to text directly into Scrivener. But what am I losing there by not doing the audio recording and recording an audio file either through voice memos or with a voice recorder?
I think it depends on the person.
I knew.
But again, it's back to my original point. It's just a tool for inputting your story. I think if you're feeling hot and you got something that you need to add to your story real fast in Scrivener, open up your Scrivener app and you just hit dictate. By all means, go for it. It's like these days, the dictation on a modern Apple phone is pretty fantastic. So. You can do punctuation or not do punctuation. It'll try to do it for you.
Sure.
I was going to ask that. I was going to say, do you, even if you're doing voice memo, like, do you speak out because I've used Otter. Otter was terrible for speech to text directly in. I used Dragon for a while, and they pick up really well punctuation and like open quote, close quote. I didn't want to go back and have to put in all the quotation marks for dialogue and that sort of thing. So you could speak it. Some people don't like to speak it. Is it just depending on the software you're using, that whether or not you speak the punctuation or not?
I think it's personal preference. It depends what helps you organize your sentences better as you're dictating. I think it comes down to that. So if you like to use punctuation because it helps you organize sentence structure in your head better, great. That's what it's there for a reader or for the writer. It helps you organize your sentence structure. Pauses can do the same thing. So if you are speaking a sentence and you use your pauses, then it still helps you organize a sentence in your brain, the clauses and phrases and such. So that your sentences you write good sentences, right? That you're using good sentence structure. So again, if speaking, the punctuation helps you organize your sentences better, then by all means do that. If pauses in the middle of your sentence do the same thing, that's good too.
Yeah. Anecdotally, the second major barrier to dictation for me is critical voice. And ironically, I didn't used to think I suffered from critical voice, but then I realized that instinct to stop in the middle of a session and go back and tweak words or sentences because they're not what you envision in your head, that's my critical voice. And it makes me stop my momentum. Can you talk about that a little bit? What critical voice is, specifically how it shows up? Unalive your critical voice. How do you do that?
Man, people have issues. We all have issues. Man, critical voice can come up from things our parents told us when we were kids. You know, so what I said earlier, like making sure that you have as low stress and anxiety as possible before you start writing, because that's going to give you a quick path to critical voice in the middle of your writing. Getting out of the habit of editing as you go, that's also going to help because that activates critical voice.
I think for me, it's really this isn't good enough. This isn't what it feels like in my head. And I have to keep reminding myself, trust yourself in the process. You're dictating a raw vomit first draft. Like, I have to keep telling myself that over and over again. Like, it's so weird. It's like things, but then emotionally there's a disconnect.
So you mentioned this thing about like talking about your critical voice. And I think you mentioned at some point like that can come from like childhood experiences, like things your parents told you, like childhood, I don't necessarily want to say trauma per se, but right, that critical, they tell you that, what you say to your children will become their internal voice.
Right.
So when you said that, that clicked with me. Maybe expand about that, how you deal with critical voice, that sort of thing.
Yes. So specifically, critical voice. I think it's important for all of us to have this little fix in our brain. Whether you're like a deep outliner or you have a movie in your head, when you sit down to write, and then you try to reproduce the movie in your head, right? So you've got the scene in your head. You've been working on it for months. You've got it perfect. It's so exciting. You're just madly in love with the scene that you have in your head. And then you go to write it, and you're just typing away, or whether you're dictating, and like you're in like 3 paragraphs in, and you're like, well, this is total crap. This is nothing like the movie in my head. It's never going to be, right? The experience that you're creating on page is completely separate than the awesome outline that you've spent years perfecting or months perfecting, or the movie in your head. You can't micromanage the reader experience to the point where you can reproduce that movie in your head. It's truly impossible to do. So if you're in love with the scene that you've had in your head for a long time and you go to type it, of course it's not going to be as good. You're going to read that and you're going to be like, well, this kind of sucks. It's nothing near what I love and I'm shooting for. So you're already setting yourself up for failure. You're already going to activate that critical voice that says, this isn't very good. It's supposed to be this other thing. So understanding that what you're creating on the page, the experience that you're creating for the reader, it is different than the movie in your head. You can use your deep outline or the movie in your head as a guide for you, but you're never going to reproduce it, and you have to be okay with that, because that's going to set you up immediately for that sense of failure. Does that make sense?
Right. That does.
Nails it on the head. Exactly and I didn't realize that was what was happening until you said it, but the words on the paper are missing the nuance of the movie. And I couldn't quite pin why I was unhappy. I'm like, it's not complex enough. It's the nuance, the setting, the senses you're imagining, the subtext. It's like, you can't put that all on paper.
No, there's a lot of gaps.
And they're different artistic mediums too. So there are stories that can be easily conveyed in the medium of movies, television, that are more or less effective in book form. So I remember reading Isaac Asimov's, is it Forward to Foundation, or there's a Forward to Foundation and there's Prelude to Foundation. It's been a while, long time since I read them, but you get introduced to this character and you go through like the whole book, and then you finally realize that, that character is this other person they've been referring to this whole time. You just didn't know it. That couldn't work in a movie. Yeah. You couldn't do that. because you're literally showing the person there in the room with them, and then also showing that other character. The author, the writer, just never told you explicitly that those two people are the same person. So that demonstrates the point, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, that the movie in your head can't be the book you're going to write, because there are things that won't translate, if you know what I mean.
Right. You can't write as
That's a
good.
very specific example, but
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And just mechanically even, it's not exactly the same. Now, I did want to spend some time asking you and talking to you about your writing coaching and what you help authors with. Give us some insight into that. When you're coaching an author, what does that look like? What things are you I'm sure some of the things we're talking about now, and dictation and, like you mentioned, tools are probably part of the coaching, but what's that process like when you're working with an author?
The first thing you got to know is that it's a slow process. There is no 1 month cure, right? It kind of drives me crazy. I can't figure it out. But a lot of writing coaches are, they're like $400 to like $1,000 a month for their services. And man, I don't care how far you think you're going to get in a month, but if I was dropping that kind of dough, and like, I would want to fire people, because you can only get so far with overcoming insecurities, working through your fears, developing a writing practice that's consistent on a regular basis, establishing boundaries. All of that stuff takes a lot of time. So you can, in your first coaching call, you can identify all of the hang-ups that a person might have with their writing. So it's like critical voice, no boundaries with family, my work makes me stressed out, and I think my writing sucks. So we identified those things. But man, it's gonna take months to unpack those things, figure out where they're coming from. And then once you start applying the tool, my job, 90% of my job is hand-holding. Okay, we're working through our stuff. So don't quit. Let's stay at it week to week. Let's keep checking in. And eventually over time, and we're talking, 6 months down the line, people can realize how to navigate some childhood stuff that comes up, the things that our parents burdened us with. Is some of that stuff going to go away? Probably not. But we learn how to navigate those fears and insecurities so that we can do the work that we want to do. So
Right.
That's sort of my coaching in a nutshell. And if there was any of my clients that were on this call, maybe they could speak to that. But I feel that maybe that's what I do is I hold people's hands while we work through the difficult things, and we develop tools, we develop strategies, a lot of trial and error. We try something for a month. Right? Let's try this type of strategy for a month, and shoot, what if it doesn't work out? Like, okay, well, let's pivot and let's try something else. Luckily, I have been doing this for almost a decade, so I can usually tell different types of writers and the types of frustrations that they might have, and offer, the more likely solutions early on. I guess that just comes with experience.
Sure.
So, I think I answered your question.
But there are some things, I know, but there are some things I imagine that you kind of, like you said, you have to try to see, especially if it's something that it's a problem that maybe you've never really addressed. You got to try something to solve the problem. And sometimes you don't know until you try whether or not that solution is going to work. So that does make sense. So it's more, writing coaching, like for people who maybe are like unsure about like what the boundaries are, you're not necessarily like their editor telling them how they should craft their story. You're maybe helping them more with like the logistics of how you incorporate just the process of writing into your life in a way that you can maintain. Probably some goal setting in there as well. I'm guessing like, this is what your goals are. Okay, this is the way that we can navigate what's in the way of that to get where you're wanting to go.
It's a mix. Yeah. So the accountability bit, goal setting, that's a huge deal. And that's, for some people, that's all they want. Right? They don't want therapy.
Sure.
They just want some accountability. And that's great. Those are love those clients. And then there are ones who, we talk story, right? Like, so let's, I'm beta reading, we're talking story. I'm a great sounding board for people when they talk stuff out. After a while, you know what makes a good story, so you can offer the right types of suggestions without, spoon feeding people their ideas. And that's my favorite. I love talking story. So let's talk story, right? And I would say, 50% of my clients are romance writers. So let's talk romance. What makes a good romance story, and what do we put in, what do we leave out? Like, how do we escalate tension? How do we make it amazing? How do we make it so it's
Right.
current to the market? All of that kind of stuff. So, well, we talk about everything. We're all over the place. It's whatever a writer needs in order to be successful. And if this
Sure.
time of year you're suffering with motivation because it's dark outside and gloomy, and you just don't want to write, and you'd rather bang your head against the wall for 6 months because that's the time of year, then we're gonna work on motivation. If it's summertime and you're just kicking ass and you got a couple books that you're out there and you're working on marketing, we'll talk marketing strategies. So it's as writers, as artists, we all have our own stuff. So we talk about whatever you need to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an interesting, because I guess I made a bit of an assumption there, because story, but now that you say that, it totally makes sense that like talking through those story roadblocks would be part of the process, because, we're still different from working with, say, like an editor. If you're working with a literary editor, you've probably written the book already, and then they're telling you after the fact. But I could see that being very helpful to be like, I'm in the middle of this draft, or I'm outlining this book and I'm stuck on this element of the plot, or I'm stuck on this character. And I could see that being very helpful, because I've actually done that, like in my own amateur, not official writing coaching, but I have some folks who, like, they know I'm a writer, and so they've asked me questions and asked me about their stories, and I've done that sort of thing, like, oh yeah, it's like this, you know what I mean? I've helped people in that way, so that makes sense that'd be part of the process.
And it's fun. It's really
Yeah.
fun. Talking stories
Oh yeah,
is way fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
And I want to put in a plug for those of you who are data responsive, because I've been coaching with Chris for several years now, and I think we underestimate how much we need somebody there to ping off of, because my process is constantly shifting. And as my environment shifts and my process shifts, I have different barriers that pop up. And a lot of times I need to talk through it and figure out what's happening. And then a lot of times I need somebody to be like, stop that. But it changes every month. And there are weeks where, and then all of a sudden it'd be like, Coach, I need you.
Yeah.
It can be like that.
So Emma, what are your current struggles right now that you're dealing with, and how can we help you today?
It's process. It's always process. And the disconnect between what I want to achieve. Like, I'm constantly telling Sensei, I want to do 5K and get back to 10K. And he's like, yeah, that's wonderful. That's not reality.
Go get him, Grasshopper.
Yeah. And sometimes you need positive reinforcement, and then sometimes you need the coach to pull you back and be like, okay, how are we going to get there? And remember, there are these things that are, so yeah.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. All right. I think this brings us naturally to our final segment for today, which is the story behind the story. In this segment, we talk to our guests about their origin story as an author, or in this case, even as a writing coach here. Chris, I want to ask you, because you're an author and you're a writing coach, and I imagine that those two origin stories are probably intertwined to some degree.
Yeah.
But what got you started in just writing in general? And then how did that turn into this writing coaching aspect of your career?
Writing all my life. Got really into literary fiction in my late teens and early 20s. I wanted to be Joseph Conrad. Got Joseph Conrad on the wall. I wanted to write Heart of Darkness, do that kind of stuff. And luckily I didn't, because that would never sell these days. And then I started with memoir, right? I had this, I thought I was going to I wanted to write funny memoir, right? And so that was my first book, was a memoir book, and there's no money in that, right? So, and then I was like, as starting to get involved with, online writing groups, and realizing, oh, there's this whole other path. And, we're talking about 2011, 2012, right about there. And then I jumped fully into sci-fi romance because I wanted to be a writer and I wanted to be successful. And we were just coming out of KU1 at that point. So, there was still, the streets were still paved with gold in a sense. And it was great, right? So I was sci-fi romance under a couple pen names and it was a great time. Then, the world started to change. That was back in the day when you could put a pre-order up on a brand new pen name that no one has ever heard of before and make sales on a pre-order with a brand new pen name. Like, that's wild that was actually the case at that time. Not the case anymore. I don't know if you've noticed. Can't do that anymore. So I started to realize that maybe that wasn't the path for me. And in my own explorations, I came up with a couple of nonfiction titles that did all right. Foolproof Outline, Foolproof Dictation. And then it was Joanna Penn reached out to me and she was like, "Hey, do you want to come and talk about Foolproof Dictation? And like, here's our date. We're going to do a podcast." And I was like, I got to find a way to maximize this. Like, I have a podcast coming up. It's got a huge following. How in the world can I leverage this? I'm going to start a coaching business. And I created this coaching business in 2 weeks so that I could have a link to share when the podcast happened. So, fake it till you make it, jump in the fire sort of a thing. And that's what I did. I was like, well, I'm going to teach some of the stuff that I know. And then, that Joanna Penn Creative Penn podcast started everything for me. Thank you. So the coaching, the coaching business started. I was not a good coach at that time. I had no idea how to do any of it, but it is a learning process. So you just got to start. And then came across, a couple well-known romance writers really who liked me, and then it just became luckily word of mouth. I didn't really do a lot of marketing. It was just a word of mouth experience for me. And then luckily I got better at helping people, which had a lot to do with, shutting up and listening to people.
Right.
So it's great. So that was it. That's kind of my journey. And here we are today. I still write fiction and I still publish fiction. Stepped out of romance. And I'm working on a series now and I haven't started publishing yet, but pretty exciting. And still doing the nonfiction. I don't know. That was it. I think that's everything.
Yeah. Right. But it's a good sign too when your business grows by word of mouth, especially in that type of business too, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Because having to throw advertising dollars behind something is something that's always maybe, a piece of the puzzle for some people, for some businesses. But when you know that your clients are getting the benefit from your coaching, that they're going and telling other people, "Oh, you're having this problem? Yeah, you need to talk to Chris." I can imagine that's an encouraging thing.
It is an encouraging thing.
What are some of because I like also how you said just like fake it till you make it, and I totally respect that too. And you're being able to admit that you've become a better coach over time. If you had like one major lesson to pass on to people from all your years of coaching, right? I'm putting you on the spot here, and you can take some time to think about it. What's the one thing, if you had to tell every author just one thing about writing, what would you tell them?
Yeah, that's easy. Know your process. I would say know your process. I've worked with a handful of people who we would work on outlines, work on their outlines. 6 months into it, we realized they're not an outliner. Right. Or likewise, they're just, they're writing by the seat of their pants. And it's like, do you know structure? Do you know how to tell a good story? Let's stop and, let's examine your process. Lots of people, talk about silver bullets, right? What's the new outlining process that everyone's doing? What's the new structure that everyone's doing? So know your process and embrace it. So that takes a little bit of sometimes it means letting go of something that you're clinging on to because you consider it to be a safety net, right? This is particularly for people who outline who should not be outliners, right? They come across they come across an outline in Scrivener it just helps them fill in all the blanks. But when they come to actually write, it's like trudging through mud for some reason. But I have the story already all figured out. Why is it? Well, it's because you're not an outliner. But you cling to all of these tools because it feels like a safety net. It feels like it's going to keep you from failing. But unfortunately, your creative spark thrives in chaos often enough. It's still like structure. But if you create too many safety nets You're not going to give your creative spark enough room to play, or the other way around, right? Like you think you're a discovery writer and you've been writing stuff, but for some reason the good reviews aren't coming in. Well, it's because maybe you haven't learned structure enough. What depends whatever genre you're in. So
Yeah.
understand your process, which also includes your writing speed, which is a big one, especially coming out of the rapid release wild, wild west that we were in, for the last 4 to 5 years. Know what your writing speed is and embrace that. Because if you stick to the writing speed that's appropriate for who you are as a creative person, you're going to get a lot more done. If you're trying to write a book a month, but that's not you, you're going to write a lot less than a book a month. You're going to, right? So if you are someone who writes 500 words a day, if you're someone who writes 5,000 words a day, awesome. Know who you are and embrace it and be okay with that. And then build your business model around that. If you write 1,000 words a day comfortably for 2 hours a day, that's your sweet spot. Great. Embrace that. And then build your business model around that. So instead of building your business model around chasing the algorithms, right? Like I need to write a book a month so that I always have something, pre 30-day cliff area. So if you're chasing algorithms or trying to use business models because you've seen other successful writers use this particular production schedule, but it's not who you are, you're going to burn out. That's where the burnout comes from, is trying to use a business model that's not who you are. So really ask yourself what your process is. Am I an outliner? If I am, what's an appropriate amount of outlining? Maybe I'm outlining too much. Maybe all I need are bullet points. Maybe all I need are, tent pole scenes to get me through, and everything else I can fill in as I go. Maybe I do need a deep outline. Great. So, but really ask yourself who you are. And one way to do that is think about when you first got into writing. When you were first writing and it was a blast and you were probably just doing pen and paper in your spiral notebook, what system were you using? And that's probably more akin to who you are. It's as we start learning about successful writer business that we start doing things, we start adding on things, we start adding on other people's processes. So know who you are, know your process, know your speed, and then build your business model around that. And then that's going to sustain you in the long run. That's it.
That really resonates with me. Actually, that resonates with me a lot.
Yeah.
I like that.
I was thinking
Excellent.
of, when I learned, I had done some coaching and I learned that I'm not an outliner. Like I'm, I guess, a planter. Like I can do a very mild, very little outline, but I had spent like weeks outlining, and I got to a part in the story and I was typing and I went, this is so much better. And it completely flips the story around. And now my outline is dead. Like almost everything in it. I had to throw away the whole middle. And I'm like, why did I do that? And when I was in another coaching, they were like, because you didn't need to write that. You just needed to write. You didn't need that outline to make your work for you. So now when I outline, if I outline at all, it's overarching plot. And then I go in depth when I'm actually typing. Sometimes it leads to roadblocks. So still,
I am the resident outliner in the group. And that's something I figured out about myself over time. And it was interesting that you said, like, going back to when you first started writing, because, spiral bound notebook, that was me. And actually now, like, I'm thinking about it, it predates when I actually tell people when I started writing. Because I always tell people, I started writing when I was 15. I'm like, no, I wasn't. I was younger than that because I was writing in that notebook. And I would outline things as well. I would write outlines for these stories that I never wound up writing, but it was just like a natural thing that I did. So it makes sense for me. And
I used to think I was an outliner like you. I mean, I used to.
Well, and the majority of what I'm doing when I'm outlining, because for me, I think my problem is that when I'm writing, I am in the middle of a chapter or scene. I'm discovering it as I'm writing. I'm not like outlining to that level of detail, but I know what's going to happen ahead of time. And I especially need it to know what I'm trying to set up. That's where I need the outline, is like, what am I setting up later? What seeds do I need to be planting, and kind of where do I need to plant them so that that tree is like sprouted and growing, but fully grown by the time we get to the payoff. So just what you said there really resonated with me. And it's like, yeah, that was me writing in the spiral bound notebook, making outlines, makes sense to like, yeah, go back to your roots and what were you originally, because I think a lot of writers probably discount some of that, like their early writing habits, and just dismiss that as like, oh, that was when I was a baby writer. I didn't know what I was doing. But that instinctive writing style was maybe you actually probably knew more than you thought you did.
One of my
Or your instincts knew.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too, Jack. Because last couple of months, maybe the last 6 months, I started to realize, especially in the last 2 months, that I like to write in candy scenes. And I've always had a story in my head. And when Sensei was talking, I was like, I remember when I would pen and paper my first original stories, it would always start as like a candy scene, a situation, high tension in my head. And then I would go and just discovery write it. And I'm like, oh my God, but then you get into indie writing and they're like, have your scene by scene, your beat by beat. I'm like, but that's not how I wrote when I was a kid at all.
Right.
one of my favorite.
That's a gem. You need to pull that out in makeup because that's a gem. Go back to no, seriously, because they say a lot. If you want to know what career path resonates, go back to what you wanted to be as a kid. So this is the same thing. How did you write organically?
I was just gonna say, a client comes to me and they're like, I've never published before, or I've never published on Amazon before. I was hoping you can make me into a writer. And I'm like, well, what writing have you done? They're like, well, I've been publishing on fanfic. I've been publishing fan fiction for like the last 6 years. And I'm like, oh, you're us. You're so golden. Like, you don't change anything. Like, you're already there. You're writing free fiction because you're passionate about it and you love it, and it's full of mistakes. But people eat it up, and it's just ridiculously amazing. Don't change, right? Like, stay gold, pony boy. Like, you don't want to do anything else other than that same passionate fan fiction mentality that you have now. Like, that's the gold. Stay that way. Because we don't have to unpack all of the things that you've been learning on writer forums for the last 6 years.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap things up there for today. I want to thank you, Chris, for joining us. Before we say our goodbyes and everything, if you got anything that you want, I'll let you pitch your website, books, whatever it happens to be, anything you've got to share with the folks watching.
Sweet. Well, I have my latest release. Let's plug that. It's a nonfiction book. It's called The 9 Practices. It is just how to establish practices in life, and whether it's a writing practice or a yoga practice or a gardening practice, living a life that is based in practices and how to experience a lot of meaning and growth from that. So it's a book called The 9 Practices.
Awesome.
That's all I got.
Thank you again, Chris, for joining us today. And thank you, of course, to my co-hosts, Kelly Tanzi and Emma Allison. Thank you to those of you who are watching or listening today. While you're here, while I have your attention, if you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're listening to us on any podcast platform, please follow us, leave a review there. It would mean a lot to us as well. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you all in the next one. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel